Baruch Ata Adonai Inu Melech Haolam Asher so beauty for Torah. Praise to you, Lord God, rule the universe, who's made us holy with your commandments and commanded us to busy ourselves with the words of Torah. And with that, I'm pulling up the source sheet. And we will begin. So our topic this evening is a Talmudic story, which I'm calling A Robber and a Rabbi Meet at a River. Hinda, would you read our on one foot introduction, please? Rabbi Yochanan, Reish Lakish.
Yes, Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish on one foot. There were two rabbis who lived in the land of Israel in the 200 CE. They were Amoraim, meaning rabbis of the Gemara, but not the Mishnah. Act 1.
Thank you very much. All right. Naomi, would you read Act 1, please?
The Gemara relates, one day Rabbi Yochanan was bathing in the Jordan River. Reish Lakish saw him and jumped into the Jordan, pursuing him. At that time, Reish Lakish was the leader of a band of marauders. Rabbi Yochanan said to Reish Lakish, "Your strength is fit for Torah study." Reish Lakish said to him, "Your beauty is fit for women." Rabbi Yochanan said to him, "If you return to the pursuit of Torah, I will give you my sister in marriage, who is more beautiful than I am." Reish Lakish accepted upon himself to study Torah. Subsequently, Reish Lakish wanted to jump back out of the river to bring back his clothes, but he was unable to return as he had lost his physical strength. As soon as he accepted the responsibility to study Torah upon himself. Rabbi Yochanan taught Reish Lakish Bible and taught him Mishnah and turned him into a great man. Eventually, Reish Lakish became one of the outstanding Torah scholars of his generation.
Thank you. And our context, please.
This story comes from the Babylonian Talmud Masechet, Tractate, Bava Metzia, which is about property law. The Mishnah 7:1 talks about what is fair to expect from employees. The Gemara, they might be tired after working all day, and then says that Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, used this fact to help a police officer ascertain who might be tired for honest labor and who might be tired from stealing at night. Is that tired or tried?
No, that's tired.
Okay. Next, the Gemara says that the Rabbi Ishmael, son of Rabbi Yosef, also helped to catch thieves. The Gemara goes on to explain that Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Ishmael were both portly gentlemen. It gives more details about them, but also includes Rabbi Yochanan in this description. From there, the Gemara goes on to talk about how handsome Rabbi Yochanan was and how he didn't have a beard. This brings us to our story.
Okay, thank you. I always find it a little interesting as to what is a given story doing in a tractate that appears to have nothing to do with the story at all, which is why I try to lead you through the winding twists and turns that bring us to how we get to our story.
Would you like to explain to us how tiredness from work differs from tiredness from theft?
Yes. So the idea here is that Rabbi Elazar suggested to a police officer that he should go see who appears to be tired, and then the police officer should ask each of these tired people what kind of work they did, and if they gave an answer, if they were able to give an answer where it appeared like they were telling the truth, then you should assume this to be an honest alibi. Whereas if they had all seemed like they were making something up on the spot, then probably that's not what they were doing at night, and they were probably thieves, and you should take them in for further questioning.
But the thief could be very honest and say he's tired from stealing.
Yeah, well, in that case.
So then you can let him go, right? You wouldn't take him in because he wasn't lying.
In that case,
for being a thief.
Yes, there we go.
Well, I have to say, I now have, having read this a couple of times, I now have these visions of a TV show, you know, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Ishmael, private detectives.
That's great.
Wait to see your script.
Excellent. Is a good.
So how does this relate to the story in the river? That still has me perplexed.
Yeah.
So this relates the story in the river only insofar as this shows how we get from property law and what you expect from your employees to Rabbi Yochanan. So it says, so like it's been talking about the physical descriptions of these two rabbis, Rabbi Elazar and Rabbi Ishmael. And then it gives more descriptions about them, but it also includes Rabbi Yochanan now. And it says he doesn't have a beard. And this brings us to our story here of Rabbi Yochanan.
Ah, okay. Now I understand. So you're talking, all right.
So basically I've just like summarized, I've given you the Cliff Notes version of like 3 pages of Gemara.
Okay.
All right, so what is your reaction or your questions to this first act of the story?
It's a little confusing, to say the least, and I'll tell you why I think it's confusing. First of all, when he says your beauty is fit for women, well, of course, I guess we're looking at the 21st century. I mean, that means as an attractive man, he would be a good fit for an attractive woman. Is that what that's saying? Does that mean he looks like a woman? I guess I didn't. That's one question I had. Then the one about, I'll give you my sister, like, well, who is he to give the sister away? I guess I'm wondering. And then the third thing is that thing about he was unable to return. He lost his physical strength, but he was still, he didn't drown. So those things, those are 3 things that are totally puzzling me. They're like a nice story, but those things, I just can't get beyond them in order to, you know, follow this.
Yeah. The question of your beauty is fit for women is one where the commentators over the last 1500 years have diverged on their interpretation of the story. Like, does Reish Lakish think that he is a woman since he doesn't have a beard and this is noteworthy, and therefore presumably like most men had beards at the time, so maybe that's why Reish Lakish jumped into the river after him, because he thinks he's a woman? Or is it like, you're so handsome, like, why are you secluding yourself, not secluding yourself, but like, why are you spending your time with Torah study instead of spending more time with the opposite gender? It could go either way. But you are not the first person to pose any of these 3 questions, which hopefully makes you feel like you were in the mind of a company of great minds.
Reading the story, though, somebody might think that if he decides to study Torah, he's going to lose his physical strength, presumably because you don't need physical strength to study Torah. But we know all the sages had jobs, had professions outside of just sitting at the table and studying Torah, and they needed strength for that. So I don't understand what losing your strength has got to do with studying Torah, or what studying Torah has got to do with losing your strength.
Well, But you think he jumped in and he can't go out of this because he's jumping in and he got so caught up in the study that he wasn't able to escape any longer. I mean, that absorbed him completely, because it doesn't say anything about him marrying the sister. And how does he marry the sister? Doesn't get out of the river.
Hmm.
So I'm saying, is this some sort of I'm not sure whether a metaphor or just you consider jumping to he actually accepts something and then he becomes consumed with it to study, and then he doesn't have strength or force to do other things but study. I'm improvising. Why it just doesn't seem right. It doesn't go out. He can't get out. So how does he study? Or is he going to study in the river? Or was the river just a whole stream of commentary that we're seeing here? That's just a whole style, the format to learn. You don't get out. It just keeps on going and it takes you someplace else.
Hmm. Certainly, as a Jewish storyteller myself, I would say that either there's a major narrative hole here about how he gets out of the river, or it's an allegory.
That's the word, allegory.
But yes, you have pinpointed a major narrative issue here.
It seems to me that that it's saying here, but I mean, there's so much that's not in bold type, and I gather those are the things that are put in by our translator, or maybe you put them in to make the Gemara text intelligible when it's so very elliptical. But so it's an understanding that what he would if you return to the pursuit of Torah. Well, it says if you return, I gather that it makes sense in this context that what he had left was the pursuit of Torah. So Rabbi Yochanan knew that Reish Lakish had been a Torah student at any rate, right? And he wants him back in it and offers him this prize. And to pick up on an earlier question, I gather that his sister didn't have a father alive, and that Yochanan was the senior man who had in a position to give his sister in marriage, presumably with her consent. But it's curious that he was a Torah student already, Reish Lakish, and that it's enervating, or it's exhausting even to contemplate going back to that. There's just so much in here, or
Yeah. Yeah, and I would agree, I would raise up Phil's point that the things that are in bold are what's actually in the Gemara. The things that are not in bold are what the editors of Sefaria, or possibly they're using just like straight the editors of another copy that they were able to acquire. But some editor, probably based off of centuries of commentators, used to translate and interpret this. It's certainly, when it comes to rabbinic stories, it is not me who is filling in the gaps here. Or if I do, I usually put brackets, but Talmud translation is not my strong suit. And so what this means is that if you want to interpret the text, you can connect the bold words, and sometimes you might come up with a different meaning than what is being presented to you. And that's kosher. That just puts you in a 15-year-old conversation about what the text might mean.
I just want to say that the study, accepting the responsibility to study Torah day and night, is exhausting. And so I don't quite understand why they connect that you're losing your physical strength You certainly lose some of your mental acuity because you've been absorbed in Torah study. But I don't think you should be losing your physical strength unless you're just sitting still all day long and your body atrophies. I don't see why they link losing physical strength as soon as you accept responsibility to study Torah.
This is a question.
Could it be that by giving in to the study, he gave up a sense of his own identity or power over himself, his own decisions? And he kind of just gave in, which sometimes that would mean you would feel tired or feel less physically motivated. I mean, he in a way he gave up. He was bribed in a way to give up himself, his own identity, his own thoughts.
Certainly one take on it. 222. How could the story have turned out differently?
Lakish could have said, no, I won't return to study Torah.
Also, too, I mean, there's a lot we can talk about. Is being a Torah scholar mutually exclusive to being a strong person physically? And maybe there's an element here, if you were given the choice, oh, I can become a Torah scholar, but in exchange, I have to give up my physical strength. That could have brought things a little bit different. That could have brought a whole different set of circumstances, and there could certainly be lessons in that as well.
And Torah scholars not go to the gym to work out?
It's a stereotype in a sense, because even in the modern period, I was reading a novel recently. I read one nonfiction. It's called The Matzo Ball, kind of cute. And one of the side characters in it is described as a yeshiva bocher, whatever you call him. And the author also kind of describes his physical appearance as less than an Adonis, let's say. So, there's definitely a stereotype there about, can you, whether it's because you're spending so much time in one that you don't have time for the other, but you can say that about a lot of activities. If you work a lot, you don't have time for your family, blah, blah, blah. But is there a connection that if, you devote yourself to studying Torah and Mishnah and Talmud and so forth, that you can't have a physicality? You know what I mean?
I read it as he lost his physical strength, or maybe his physical strength was taken from him so that he wouldn't go back to marauding. He wouldn't be tempted to be distracted from his Torah studies and go back to his old ways.
That's why he couldn't get out.
Yeah, sort of got stuck.
That's also kind of cause and effect, because then you could also argue that by virtue of studying Torah, you would be so educated and become such a moral core that you would very easily, it would be natural to give up your, non-ethical behaviors and things like that. So, that's an interesting take on it, but I'm wondering if that has to be contingent upon losing your physical prowess as well.
He does indeed get the sister to marry, and she's more that beautiful. I would think you have a distraction without worrying about physical strength.
Well, he's really the sister of the sisters. You're talking allegory. Is something more beautiful, my sister? Is that the rabbi's? That's how close he feels to the Torah, and that's what's beautiful, and the knowledge and the wisdom you derive from studying it and understanding it. You take out everything that's not in bold, and you read it. It seems to make more sense to me. And I almost say, well, in that case, because you don't hear about him marrying the sister later on. He's just studying and he became a great man.
Hmm.
And also for, to think of a rabbi to make a statement that my sister is more beautiful than I am, that's, certainly something you don't hear every day.
No, but that's what I'm saying to myself. That's why maybe he considers it more, it's something of greater beauty, at least spiritually, to be able to study and grasp some of the deeper meaning than what I would have, certainly from my cursory reading and studies. And folks who are able to study it more depth realize the beauty of the stories and the information that's there. That's my take on it.
It was very metaphorical, no question about it.
Yeah.
Very much so.
All right. Why do you think that Reish Lakish decided to give up leading his band of marauders?
He wanted to marry a beautiful woman.
Hmm.
He was learning about the commandments and the way to live a more righteous life by studying Torah.
It's interesting. It says he turned him into a great man. Well, the bar is not that high because he was a criminal, right? So, I mean, just for him to give up his criminal ways would kind of be a good milestone, but to be a great man or a great person, that's like above and beyond. So I think that's a little bit interesting take as well.
Maybe he was looking for a husband for his sister. And he saw something in this individual.
Hmm.
He didn't want to give over his sister until he knew the man was reformed, which makes him a good brother. So I guess that's.
David, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, the question was, why do you think Reish Lakish decided to give up being the leader of the band of marauders?
Maybe he thought, his time was up. If he kept at it, he might be killed. He might, lose his band, end up in jail. Maybe he thought it's time to close up the business while he's ahead.
Hmm.
There's also an interesting play on the word rabbi. The word Rav can also mean, I believe, master. And Reish Lakish was the master of this group of wild ones. He was called Rav by them, I believe. And maybe he felt that was, if he's going to be called Rav already, he needs to be a real Rav and be a rabbi and earn that title appropriately, as opposed to being the master of a band of looters and robbers.
Hmm. How do you think, so taking this at its shot interpretation, its surface interpretation, how do you think the sister felt about being promised in marriage to some other guy?
Isn't that what happened in those days, David?
Yeah.
I mean, that would have been the expectation. I mean, obviously now we'd be appalled, but at that time it's like business.
But she might not have liked the idea of a robber.
Hmm.
You don't
And you'd
have to
also
go.
think a rabbi would find a more suitable mate for his sister, for his flesh and blood.
There's still lots of places today where girls get married off and don't have much choice in the matter.
Oh, right.
I mean, I have a very dear friend, she's now in her 80s, who was married off in Israel. She was to an Iraqi Jew she was married off in India to an Iraqi Jew who's going to Israel. She was 16 years old. She had no choice.
I had a new client today, a young woman whose 3 older siblings are Muslim from Pakistan. They all were arranged for marriage. She's 18 years younger than the last sibling, so her parents stopped doing that finally, and she can choose who she wants. But all 3 of them had to be married at 16. They were engaged and married at 21.
Well, they were married at 16. This woman came from a Jewish family, and she was married off at the age of 16. She saw her husband for the first time the day she was married.
Well, Hi Solomon from our congregation, he's told this story multiple times. His mother, who I met before she passed away, they were from Iran. She was engaged at age 4 and promised to someone. And at 16, they were married. And, you know, he was born to a woman who was like 17 years old or 16. I think she was married actually even younger at 12, if I recall that correctly. And then she had the first baby at 16. Because that's what they did.
I guess what's, I think, more unusual, I mean, I agree with what everyone's saying. That is the reality in various cultures, even close to this day. But usually, as I think each of you said in your examples, it's a parent, a father, or, you know, the parents that do it, usually not a brother. So are we reading into this maybe that they had no parents at this point? You know, I mean, it just raises so many questions.
Yeah.
It was not just, you know, I don't want to say I was appalled, because I know this did go on, and this was centuries ago, not what you guys are describing in your lifetimes. But again, it usually wouldn't be the role of the brother unless there were no parents alive, I thought.
But and
We really
depending
need, like,
upon
more of a backstory here, I think.
Carol, go ahead.
I was going to add that she, you know, we don't know her relationship with her brother, but it certainly could have been one of trust and that he, you know, he made good decisions, and she might not question his decision and just kind of assume that if he says this is going to be a good idea, it's going to be a good idea.
I think, David, the question you asked was, how do you think the sister felt about it?
Yeah.
I don't think it entered in her mind it probably didn't enter too much into her mind on how she felt about it at the time, because she knew she had no choice, whether she liked it or not.
Yeah.
It was an accepted, that was how it happened.
Yeah. It's a good point. So do you think that Reish Lakish has totally like given up his past at this by the end of Act 1?
Well, it said it turned him into a great man. So if you're a great man, you can't be the head of robbers. So, I mean, I guess just from that closing sentence in this first act, we'd have to say that, you know, he mended his ways, but I have a feeling there's more to this than meets the eye.
There would need to be Act 2 and 3.
Yeah,
That's why we have an Act 2 and 3, I guess.
Right.
Unless there's a sequel, I was going to say. We made him into a great man, and then what happens? Does he have a fatal flaw?
We'll find out.
Yeah.
All right, let's go on to Act 2. Don, would you please read?
Certainly. One day, the sages of the study hall were engaging in a dispute concerning the following Phoenicia, text from the time of the Mishnah, which didn't make it into the Mishnah. With regard to the sword, the knife, the dagger, the spear, a hand sickle, and a harvest sickle, from when are they susceptible to ritual impurity? The Berisha answers, it is from the time of the completion of their manufacture, which is the halacha with regard to metal vessels in general. These sages inquired, and when is the completion of their manufacture? Rabbi Yochanan says it is from when one fires these items in the furnace. Reish Lakish said it is from when one scours them in water after they have been fired in the furnace. Rabbi Yochanan said to Reish Lakish, a bandit knows about his banditry, such that you are an expert in weaponry because you were a bandit in your youth. Reish Lakish said to Rabbi Yochanan, what benefit do you provide me by bringing me close to Torah? There, among the bandits, they called me leader of the bandits. And here too, they call me leader. Rabbi Yochanan said to him, I provided benefit to you as I brought you close to God, under the wings of the divine presence. As a result of the quarrel, Rabbi Yochanan was offended, which in turn affected Reish Lakish, who fell ill.
Thank you. All right. And here's a little bit of context.
You want me to read that as well, David?
Yes, please. Thank you.
This is the next part of the story sometime later. With regards to ritual impurity, think of it like the coronavirus. There are concentric circles of exposure, and there are different situations that determine whether one has or has not contracted it. Under this analogy, the discussion would be akin to, at what point is one vulnerable to contracting COVID? Except here it's, at what point in the manufacturing process is an item vulnerable to contracting ritual impurity?
All right, thank you. So that's just a little bit of explanation about ritual impurity from the Baraita. All right, so question, at what points could this part of the story have gone differently?
If Rabbi Yochanan had not reminded or brought up the fact that Reish Lakish at one time was the head of a group of bandits.
Right.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was kind of not very nice.
Yeah.
Dave, is there something in our scripture or in later writings where it's not advisable or you're not supposed to bring up somebody's sordid past if they've kind of reformed? I mean, is there anything, it almost sounds like it should be, or maybe in our liturgy, or like Yom Kippur,
Yeah.
is there anything to that?
Yeah, there is. There's something in Parshat Emor in Leviticus, not Emor, sorry, Bahar, at the end of Leviticus. I don't remember the exact quote, and I'll see if I can find it. But it's basically meant to mean like, don't say things that remind people of problematic situations. And the rabbis give the example in their interpretation of this text that like if somebody had a relative who was hung for committing a crime, you shouldn't say in their presence, you can hang that coat up by the hook. So there's a definite emphasis on like being careful with words. And also actually the 10 Commandments, when it says not to murder, the rabbis interpret this as being too obvious and say that it must have a deeper meaning, and they interpret it as not embarrassing somebody. Because when you embarrass somebody, then they may wish that they could die. Like the blood drains from their cheeks, or like they turn red as if they've died. They might in fact commit suicide, particularly in an era of cyberbullying. And you've certainly murdered their reputation. So not embarrassing somebody is a huge value in Judaism. And it could be that the rabbis had this story in mind when they had that interpretation of the 10 Commandments of not stealing. Sorry, not murdering.
David, thank you for that, and it's appropriate because Bahar was my bar mitzvah portion, but I never thought about that a million years ago. So thank you.
Yeah.
You're also not supposed to refer to a convert's background as having become a convert. Once they're converted, you're not supposed to ever refer back to that, to their past.
The other thing, he didn't have to remind him that he is this great person that did this for him also. That's kind of arrogant and egotistical. I provided benefit to you, like, hey, look, I did this for you. Look how good I am.
Yeah.
Interestingly, that leader can be bad or good. Just a word. Just how you-
Right.
Never thought of that. It's actually a neutral word. That's a good point. Either way.
It's striking to me that the way the story is told here, and then I think there's more, but I don't know what it is, or don't recall. Certainly, I don't know. Where Rabbi Yochanan, he's the one who's offended. He's humiliated a man who has a sharp tongue and was able to respond, but he's the one we're told is offended, and his offense is so powerful. He's such a character, a strong character, whatever, that Reish Lakish falls ill because he has caused harm to Rabbi Yochanan. And that is to take that very important point you mentioned before, David, about embarrassment or humiliation, and turn it upside down. It's as if Rabbi Yochanan didn't provoke it, which in the story he did.
Yeah. So why does Rabbi Yochanan, why is he offended?
He was contradicted by his student.
Yeah.
He gave his answer, and this is the person he taught said, no, it's this. He didn't agree with him.
Well, I think he got such a strong answer. He was offended. It's advice that's given to young lawyers is not to try to best the judge if the judge in matters that are not absolutely essential to your point. So if the judge makes a joke, don't respond, even though you immediately think of a better joke to respond with. Keep your mouth shut. And Rabbi Yochanan, at a certain point, Reish Lakish himself becomes a leader, even among the rabbis, I gather. But here he gets what Rabbi Yochanan thinks of as a strong rhetorical question: what benefit that you provide me? And he responds by saying, look, now I'm a leader too. I was a leader of bandits. I'm a leader here. And that was offensive to the self-importance of Rabbi Yochanan, or so it would seem. I don't want to criticize him.
Perhaps it's a matter of you don't question your betters, or in this case, don't question your teacher. You simply take what he said.
So assuming that Rabbi Yochanan did in fact marry his actual sister to Reish Lakish, how do you think she's feeling about this quarrel between her brother and her husband?
What else is new?
Might depend on whether she's happily married.
Or if she knew about his background before the wedding.
But
Or how much she really likes her brother.
No, but if back in that day, if she knew she would be given to someone, she probably has become very loyal to her husband.
Oh, yes.
Or maybe like Phil said, she just kept her mouth shut. Didn't say
I mean, we like to think, again, from the modern perspective, that she would be proud of the fact that her husband rose up from the dregs of society to be this great man. And a lot of that is owed to her brother, who she obviously loves as well. So that's like, kind of the modern day. But given the context, that she may not have known about his background, she may not have been enlightened enough, she might have just been living in the moment. So, I mean, it really depends on the perspective that you take, the way to answer that question, I think.
She could be in a bad spot, though, if Rabbi Yochanan actually said to her, whose side are you on? Am I right or is he right?
Yeah. So if you could give
David or insult.
Go ahead, Herb.
I said, we better not question you, David, or insult you because you are our teacher.
Hmm.
Yeah, we'll fall ill.
Oh dear.
Well, wouldn't it make a difference as whether or not his wife had children with him?
That's true.
Hmm.
Are we gonna
Lost me
find
there,
out?
Morris. Could you explain that, please?
Pardon?
I said you lost me with that. Could you explain it, please?
Well, yeah, I mean, if he had children with Yochanan's sister, well, then, you know, if something happens to her husband and then she's widowed, then who will, you know, support her family?
A good point.
Hmm.
I thought you were gonna say, that's an interesting point, but I thought you were also gonna say, when you brought up children, that would the children favor their dad or favor their mom, and in case favor their dad, would they turn out to be criminals, 'cause that's what he was originally, or their mother, who was the sister of a rabbi, so more righteousness there. So when you said that about, you raised a good point. I said, when you said that about children, that's kind of a whole other discussion we can have about this as well.
Yes, indeed. All right, and in recognizing the time, I'm going to move us along.
Act 3.
Act 3, Norma, would you please read it?
Rabbi Yochanan's sister, who was Reish Lakish's wife, came crying to Rabbi Yochanan, begging that he pray for Reish Lakish's recovery. She said to him, "Aha, do this for the sake of my children, so that they should have a father." Rabbi Yochanan said to her the verse, "Leave your fatherless children, I will rear them." Jeremiah 49:11. Therefore, I will take care of them. She said to him, "Do so for the sake of my widowhood." He said to her the rest of the verse, "And let your widows trust in me." Ultimately, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, Reish Lakish, died. Rabbi Yochanan was sorely pained over losing him. The rabbi said, "Who will go to calm Rabbi Yochanan's mind and comfort him over his loss?" They said, "Let Rabbi Elazar ben Padat go, as his statements are sharp. He is clever and will be able to serve as a substitute for Reish Lakish." Rabbi Elazar ben Padat went and sat before Rabbi Yochanan. With regard to every matter that Rabbi Yochanan would say, Rabbi Elazar ben Padat would say to him, "There is a ruling which is taught in a Baraita that supports your opinion." Rabbi Yochanan said to him, "Are you comparable to the son of Lakish?" In my discussions with the son of Lakish, when I would state a matter, he would raise 24 difficulties against me in an attempt to disprove my claim, and I would answer him with 24 answers, and the halakha by itself would become broadened and clarified. And yet you say to me, "There is a ruling which is taught in a Baraita that supports your opinion. Do I not know what I say is good?" Being rebutted by Reish Lakish served a purpose. Your bringing proof to my statements does not. Rabbi Yochanan went around rending his clothing, weeping and saying, "Where are you, son of Lakish? Where are you, son of Lakish?" Rabbi Yochanan screamed until his mind was taken from him and he went insane. The rabbis prayed and requested for God to have mercy on him and take his soul, and Rabbi Yochanan died. God. That's so sad. Context. The end of the story. Note that Reish is an acronym for Rabbi Shimon ben. So Reish Lakish is Rabbi Simon, son of Lakish. Oh my God. That was very confusing, David.
All right.
I mean, Yochanan was a pretty tough guy.
Yeah,
But I guess he felt really bad about what he had done because he was screaming and crying and carrying on, weeping.
hmm
And there was no one left to take care of the widow and the children.
Yeah, that's even more sad, Naomi, right?
Well, was he sad because he had something to do with having Lakish fall ill?
Yeah,
Does he think
I think so.
that after he caused the ruckus there, the disagreement and belittled him, then he felt that he may have had he regretted that, and he felt remorse for what he believed he caused,
Right.
how that left his sister and his nephews.
I mean, like the moral of the story is like, be kind to people because you never know if you're mean, what bad things can happen.
Maybe the moral is think before you speak.
Yes, right. Like, you know, what Phil said about lawyers, keep your mouth shut.
Well, I will not keep my mouth shut at this very moment, but thank you. Because it seems to me, it's so striking in this story that, which now becomes very familiar, I see, that Rabbi Yochanan, first he really does, in his own mind, certainly, cause the death. He's begged for his mercy. He won't grant it. And so he causes the death in effect. Then he finally appreciates when this man who says the inappropriate thing tells him, "Oh, you're so right." He now appreciates what he's lost in Reish Lakish, and it's remarkable that we're told the story about how completely how he didn't see this obvious fact as a person of intellect until it's too late, and he loses his mind, which is exactly the right punishment, you might say.
Yeah. I mean, it started out so happy in Act 1 and ended up so morbid in Act 3, David.
So even great people have their faults.
There's only one phrase in here that lets me know that Rabbi Yochanan had any remorse at all. It says, rending his clothing with a sign of mourning.
Yes, yes.
Otherwise, I really didn't like Rabbi Yochanan. I thought he was full of himself, very self-important, and very superior. That's what he felt about himself. The way he rephrased things too, Reish Lakish was, I will provide for you. I will take care of the children. I.
Yeah.
And it was too much. So I'm kind of glad this ended this way.
Great story, David.
So you could be considered a great scholar, and yet there's someone who said before you have some faults, or maybe just because you study and you're a great scholar doesn't mean that you've actually, besides having the arguments, you actually absorb what the lessons are, and then you model yourself on what you should have learned.
You're not immense.
Yeah, that's a good point, Charles.
Hmm.
all right.
You know.
That was great, David. That was very good.